Hello, my name is Kazu. Nice to meet you. This is part of my 365-day daily challenge, speaking English for 30 minutes straight using TOEFL type questions. No script, just the spontaneous answers, just like the real exam. Let's get started. Today, I have a class, English speaking class, and in that class, I need to give a presentation to everyone. So let me practice this presentation. I already practiced this only once, and I did transcript what I said already. So from let's start from the correction of what I said. Am I? Wait a minute. Okay, so from the beginning. Wait a minute. I chose newspapers as my example. No, not like this. Okay, I chose newspapers from general news sources. There are the 4 questions I asked to. I asked these questions to my respondents to evaluate the reliability of newspaper. Great. Maybe, yeah. I chose newspapers from general news sources. Yeah, I asked these questions to my respondents to evaluate the reliability of newspapers. First, trustworthiness. How reliable is the news in newspaper? This is already given by the textbook. Second, accuracy. How accurate is the information? And third, neutrality. How unbiased is the reporting? Fourth, standalone credibility, which means like would you believe it without checking other sources, such as websites, books, or like SNS, something like that? And they are my respondents. The first respondent was a university student. He is a male friend of mine in his early 20s. He rarely reads newspapers. The second respondent was my father. Sorry, I forgot to record. Anyway, yeah, the second respondent was my father. He is a man in his 60s and a long-time newspaper readers. Wait a minute. I asked these questions to my respondents and okay, let me do this from the beginning. I am really sorry about that. Maybe this is really boring, challenge. Sorry about that. Yeah, let's do this quickly. Okay, I chose newspapers from general news sources. Yeah, sorry, I forgot to explain the background. So like we learned news sources from so far we've learned the reliability of general news sources, because recently like fake news often come up, and cutting edge technology makes us possible to create fake information, like deep fake or just artificial videos and artificial text. Anyway, so we need to care about which is true information. Yeah, so we've learned something like that so far. Then for conclusion, we need to give a presentation in this class, in the class. And each student choose one of general news sources and then explain the reliability of newspapers based on the result of questions they ask people around them, respondents. Do I make myself clear? Do I make myself clear? Is okay? Sounds okay? Anyway, maybe it's, yeah, it's not the proper situation. I use that expression. Anyway, so let me this presentation from the beginning. First, I chose newspapers from I chose newspapers from general news sources. This is because I think newspapers are most reliable news sources. In my image. These are the 4 questions I asked. I asked these questions to my respondents to evaluate the reliability of newspapers. First, trustworthiness. How reliability is the news from newspaper? Accuracy. How accurate is the information? Neutrality. How unbiased is the reporting? And standalone credibility. This means, like, would you believe it without checking other sources? Then they are my respondents. The first respondent was a university student. He is a friend of mine, male, early 20s. He rarely reads newspapers. The second respondent was my father. He is a man in his 60s and a long-time newspaper reader. The third respondent was generative AI. Specifically, it was Claude AI. It may be a little controversial whether we can treat generative AI as a respondent. However, in previous lessons, we talked about how cutting-edge technology can be used to create fake news or artificial content. So I thought I should ask generative AI as well. And these are the results. Like, I am wondering whether I should, introduce each result of each person. Yeah, maybe I'll do that. So the left line is a student 6734. And the second respondent, my father, is all 5. He said this is because it really depends on the newspaper. So he cannot answer he cannot answer those questions for like whole newspapers because their opinions really depend on the newspaper company. So the third respondent, generative AI, 7845. So from this result, what how can I say, what we can tell from the results is there's a gap between accuracy and neutrality. So maybe it's kind of trustworthy, it is reliable about information, but it's unbiased. So the conclusion is the source you choose shapes the story you get. So, for example, my father said it depends on so much on which newspaper. And Claudia also says headline and emphasis reveal the paper's stance. So maybe the facts are reliable enough, but the opinions and ideas from those facts of each newspaper is really different. That's the conclusion, and from this conclusion, my personal opinion is this, like this is what we need to do when we reading newspaper. First, we should separate facts from opinions in the article, and then think about your opinion about the article. Then maybe newspapers trust improves. Thank you. The second half of this presentation was just I was thinking. I didn't use ChatGPT's correction, so maybe I should have used. Yeah, let's see. Let's check the correction of ChatGPT. So these are the results. As a result, I found that there was a gap between accuracy and neutrality. The average score for accuracy was 6.7, while the average score for neutrality was 4.0. The gap was 2.7 points. The gap was 2.7 points. My conclusion is that the source you choose shapes the story you get. In this context, accuracy is closely related to reliability. In other words, accuracy means the reliability of factual information. So the factual information in newspaper is generally reliable enough. However, some people think the content of newspapers really depends on the newspaper company. For example, my father said it depends a lot on which newspaper you read. Claudia also said headlines and emphasis reveal the paper's stance. It really depends on which newspaper company you choose. This is because there are big difference between newspapers, especially in their views and opinions about the facts. Great sentence. My personal opinion is that we need to be more careful about how we read newspapers. My personal opinion is that we need to be more careful about how we read newspapers, especially when it comes to not political. Critical. I said critical. So when we read newspapers, we should try to separate facts from opinion. When we read newspapers, my personal opinion is we need to be more careful. Newspaper. We separate facts from opinions. We should think about our own opinion. We should think about our own opinion on the article. Then we should think about our own opinion on the article. By doing this, I think the reliability of newspapers improves. Okay. First, so let me try again. First, I chose newspapers from general news sources. This is because I think newspapers are generally one of the most reliable news sources. These are the 4 questions I asked. Sorry, scratch that. I asked these questions to my respondents to evaluate the reliability of newspapers. First, trustworthiness. How reliable is the news? How reliable is the news from newspapers? Second, accuracy. How accurate is the information? Third, neutrality. How unbiased is the reporting? Fourth, standalone credibility. Would you believe it without checking other sources? These are my respondents. The first respondent was a university student. He is a male friend. He is a male friend of mine in his early 20s. He rarely reads newspapers. The second respondent was my father. He is a man in his 60s and a long-time newspaper reader. The third respondent was generative AI. Specifically, it was Claude AI, and it may be a little controversial whether we can treat generative AI as a respondent. However, in previous lessons, we talked about how cutting-edge technology can be used to create fake news or artificial contents. So I thought I should ask generative AI as well. Now let me explain the results. The first respondent, the university student, gave scores of 6, 7, 3, 4. The second respondent, my father, gave a score of 5 for all 4 questions. He said this was because it depends a lot on which newspaper you read. In other words, he felt that he could not give one clear answer for newspapers in general, because each newspaper company has different views and opinions. The third respondent, Claude AI, gave scores of 7, 8, 4, and 5. From these results, we can see a gap between accuracy and neutrality. From these results, we can see a gap between accuracy and neutrality. For example, the average score for accuracy was 6.7, while the average score for neutrality was 4 points. So the gap was 2.7 points. This means that newspaper may be relatively reliable when it comes to factual information. However, they may not always be completely neutral. My conclusion is that the source you choose shapes the story you get. For example, my father said it depends a lot on which newspaper you read. So much on which newspaper. Claude AI also said headlines and emphasis reveal the paper's stance. So I think the facts in newspapers are generally reliable enough. However, the interpretation of those facts can be very different depending on the newspaper company. Based on this conclusion, my personal opinion is that we need to be careful about how we read newspapers. First, when we read newspapers, we should separate facts from opinions in the article. Then we should think about our own opinion on the topic. By doing this, I think we can use newspapers in a more reliable and balanced way. Thank you. Okay, I think it's good. Yeah. You know, I was supposed to review the last challenge, but this is kind of urgent thing. That's why I did this. Maybe tomorrow, I will correct the last challenge. Yeah, I think it's okay. It's been 29 minutes. Perfect. Perfected. Okay, thank you so much. Bye bye.